So this is our theme for this evening: be change, be future. I don't know what those words mean to you or how they feel to you, but I'm going to give you just a moment with some nice music, lovely music from a guy called Pierce Roswell. It's called Reflected, for you to reflect a little bit on these words before you on the screen and how they resonate with you, how they make you feel, what they suggest. So I wonder what does future mean to you? If you're anything like me, you'll be feeling the future's gone a little bit weird at the moment. It's been weird for a long time, actually, hasn't it? You know, we went through 2 years of lockdown and not lockdown and a world engulfed in the pandemic. And suddenly the future went very, very hazy indeed. And we've come through that and we've come into more problems in our world. Obviously, the conflict, the war in Ukraine, but the whole cost of living thing, the financial, economic situation that we're in this country and in other countries too, the impact of food shortages that are being predicted on people around the world. Future doesn't really feel perhaps quite as friendly as it used to. So I don't know if any of these words here express what you're feeling, if you've got other words that you would like to write on if you could. I think that uncertainty is a key word for us all. I mean, it's always a big part of what the future holds because we don't have crystal balls. We don't have firm information. Even weather forecasts aren't always that reliable. But so there's an uncertainty about the future all the time. But I think there's a particular uncertainty around at the moment. And I think uncertainty doesn't mean that we expect the future to be bad necessarily, but uncertainty and unknown, you know, are things that we always have to come to terms with, something we have to find a way to live with. And that's always a balancing act, I think. We need a level of, if not certainty, of security or confidence in order to get on with life. And I'd like to play you a little piece by Anthony Hopkins. I love his voice, you know, always. But this is an interesting and quite vulnerable piece in which he's talking about uncertainty for him. I think he's lived through quite a bit in his life. He's managed his way through decades of recovery from alcohol. But there's a kind of fragileness about this, which I find really quite, I don't know about appealing, but which move me, shall I say.
Powerless over everything. I'm powerless over my emotions. I'm powerless over everything. There are no guarantees. I can only live with it. You know, I'm as happy. The level of my happiness is equivalent to the level of uncertainty that I can comfortably live with. Uncertainty. As long as I can comfortably live with the unknown, then I can be relatively at peace.
I think some really quite profound words in what he said then. Apparently, he says that he used to be an atheist, but he isn't anymore. I don't know when that changed, but he says, my belief is I don't want to live in certainty because that would be like hell, like the politician that gets up and says, the debate's over. Who says the debate's over? What right has any human being to say they know the truth? But then he says, as the years went by, I lost my atheism and became a believer in some form of universal intelligence. As I'm getting older, I think, what is consciousness? Why are we here? What is the human mind and brain all about? What makes a heart go for 73 years? It's impossible to understand. These are the words of a man called Stephen Toulmin, who died not that long ago, but his books have influenced me a lot over the years. He was a social commentator and a philosopher, and I love this statement, which he made in a book that he wrote in the 1990s, anticipating the millennium. And he said, we have a choice moving into the millennium between two attitudes toward the future. It's a choice between imagination and nostalgia, between facing the future and backing into it. That last statement, I think, is so powerful because it's kind of visual, you know, a choice between facing the future and backing into it. The thought of backing into the future, well, what that's saying is you're going into the future anyway, and you've got a choice. You can go into it facing it with imagination and boldness, courage, or you can just, perhaps almost in denial, back into it, grasping after what's gone before, you know, holding on to some nostalgic sense of the past and how things used to be and how we want them to stay. So he was making that as a comment about societies around the world moving into the new millennium. But I think actually it summarizes a choice that we face all the time. All the time, we've got a choice in how we will look toward the future, what attitude we will adopt toward it. Courage or fear. I wonder if you were going to look at the future, look at the world as it is now, what would you change about the world if you could? I know we don't feel necessarily that we've got an awful lot of influence in it, but what would you like to change about the world if you could? There's this project which is called Soul Pancake, and they made a series of films in which they asked a collection of people aged between 0 and 100 to answer some of life's big questions. Well, they didn't actually find anyone who was 100, but they did find a man who was 105. And in this little episode, they're asking this very question: how would you change the world? And it's kind of funny in places because there's little children involved as well as adults. And you'll notice in the bottom left of the screen is the age of the person who is speaking. So yeah, there are, as I say, some lovely answers, and I particularly like the little girl who's at the beginning and the end.
If you could change anything in the world, what would you change?
I don't know, honestly. I like everything about the world right now, but I would change that there would be no school, and I wish there would be no homework.
Stop focusing on the look of perfection.
How fast we travel. The level of technology. I wouldn't want like robots taking over the world, that kind of situation, but
I would have equality, because we don't have that yet.
For our skin color and preference and everything, I want everybody to treat each other equal.
Inequality in terms of people who are hungry and have no place to live, and other people who have so much money they don't know what to do with it.
and everyone would just be able to like eat whenever they want, and they wouldn't have to pay or they wouldn't have to work for it. It would just like grow out of the ground.
Probably change currency because all everybody wants now is money.
I'd change rich people to poor people.
It's just good weather. California weather I adore.
Can it be big? Can I say like income inequality?
Prison system in America.
Eliminate the invention of the gun.
People's ego investment in being right.
Stigmatism of mental illness.
I don't know what I would change.
So, nothing could be stolen.
Overusing social media as a way to connect.
As connected as we are, we don't listen to each other.
This incredible inability to communicate and listen to someone who doesn't agree with you.
I would try to get rid of a lot of bad beliefs. I think people believe in too many things and they don't believe in themselves.
Like, I wish people notice other people more.
More patience. People need more patience.
I would just change the amount of fear that's in the world. People are so close-minded sometimes. The loud ones.
I would rather have them be nice like it was back in the day. It was better back then.
That sounds so generic, but world peace. I just want the wars to stop.
All the country in the world be like a democratic, be like a free.
I want to change like to happiness and joy.
Gas prices? I don't know.
Well, actually, I think I know one thing. If there was a way to like get dinosaurs back, I would make that. I don't know how that would change the world, but hey, that could change the world a lot.
I love that little girl. Dinosaurs, that's what we need. And I think it's amazing for an 11-year-old boy to say he wanted to be how it was back in the day. I don't know which day that was. But, you know, there is that feeling, isn't there? I mean, some of that is really big wishful thinking and some of it's daft. But I guess most of the big thinking things that people said there are things that we would all say, that we'd all wish to change about the world. And yet it feels like it is just wishful thinking. But I think maybe we have more ability to change things than we allow in our thoughts. And that's something that the School of Life were thinking about in one of their films, why you can, in fact, change the world.
One of the things that separates confident from diffident people is their approach to history. Broadly speaking, the unconfident believe that history is over. The confident trust that it's still in the process of being made, one day, possibly, by themselves. The way we enter the world carries with it an inherent bias towards an impression that change has finished and history has been settled. Everything around us conspires to give off a sense that the status quo is entrenched. We're surrounded by big people who follow traditions that have been in place for decades, perhaps centuries. The house we live in appears as immutable as an ancient temple. The school we go to looks as though it had been performing the same rituals since the earth began. We're constantly told why things are the way they are and encouraged to accept that reality is not made according to our wishes. We come to trust that human beings have fully mapped the range of the possible. If something hasn't happened, it's either because it can't happen or it shouldn't. The result can be a deep wariness around imagining changing the world. There's no point starting a new business. The market must be full already. Pioneering a new approach to the arts. Everything is already set in a fixed pattern. Or giving loyalty to a new idea. It either exists or is mad. When we study history in a certain way, however, the picture changes sharply. Once time is speeded up and we climb up a mountain of minutes and survey centuries, change appears constant. New continents are discovered, alternative ways of governing nations are pioneered, ideas of how to dress and whom to worship are transformed. Once people wore strange cloaks and tilled the land with clumsy instruments. A long time ago, they chopped a king's head off. Way back, people got around in fragile ships, ate the eyeballs of sheep, used chamber pots, and didn't know how to fix teeth. We come away from all this knowing, at least in theory, that things do change. But in practice, almost without noticing, we tend to distance ourselves and our own societies from a day-to-day belief that we belong to the same ongoing, turbulent narrative and are, at present, its central actors. History, we feel, is what used to happen. It can't really be what's happening around us in the here and now. Things have, in our vicinity at least, settled down. To make us braver about the idea of changing things today, we might turn to some striking lines in T.S. Eliot's cycle of poems, The Four Quartets. So, while the light fails on a winter's afternoon in a secluded chapel, history is now and England. Winter afternoons around 4 p.m. have a habit of feeling particularly resolved and established, especially in quiet English country chapels, many of which date back to the Middle Ages. The air in such chapels is still and musty. The heavy stone floors have been slowly worn away by the feet of the faithful. These are not places and times to think about changing the world. Everything hints that we would be wiser to accept the way things are, walk back home across the fields, light a fire, and settle down for a quiet evening. Hence the surprise of Eliot's third line, his resonant "history is now and England." In other words, everything that we associate with history, the impetuous daring of great people, the dramatic alterations in values, the revolutionary questioning of long-held beliefs, the upturning of the old order, all this is still going on, even at this very moment, in outwardly peaceful, apparently unchanging places, like the countryside near Shamley Green in Surrey, where Eliot wrote his poem. We don't see it only because we are standing far too close. The world is being made and remade at every instant, and therefore any one of us has a theoretical chance of being an agent in history on a big or small scale. It's open to our own times to build a new city every bit as beautiful as Venice, to change ideas as radically as the Renaissance, to start an intellectual movement as resounding as Buddhism. The present has all the contingency of the past and is every bit as malleable. It shouldn't intimidate us. How we love, travel, approach the arts, govern, educate ourselves, run businesses, age and die are all up for further development. Current views may appear firm, but only because we exaggerate their fixity. The majority of what exists is arbitrary, neither inevitable nor right, simply the result of muddle and happenstance. We should be confident, even at sunset on winter afternoons, of our power to join the stream of history and, however modestly, change its course.
I think that's a really helpful little film, actually. And it presents very clearly this tension between the status quo, which in normal times can feel very, very solid and unmovable. And the film made the point that quite often the church as an institution is part of maintaining that solidarity, or, you know, that unchangeableness. And then there's a tension between that and the fact that history is this ongoing narrative and story. And at some point, people and situations change the course of history, and the status quo is challenged and begins to change. I think that for us as Christians, we can look at Jesus as someone who was such a figure who challenged the status quo of his time and envisaged a different kind of world, which he called the kingdom of God. And you wouldn't think he went about it in the most impressive fashion, really, by gathering a dozen and more ordinary people, powerless people. But the world has changed as a result of that, not entirely in the way perhaps that Jesus envisaged. But often the people who do change things in the world, the obvious ones, are not necessarily good people. Vladimir Putin has basically changed the world for the time being through what seems to be an act of vanity and egotism and stupidity and brutality. And yet, perhaps one of the most impressive things that we're seeing in our world at the moment is the way that ordinary, to us completely anonymous Ukrainian people have stood up and said no. And they didn't buckle and give in. And we don't know where all that's going to lead yet. But the fact of the matter is, someone who thought he could change the world in one way found that it's actually a lot more difficult than he was thinking. And we seriously hope that his project completely fails. But I think that little film points to the fact that we are all, in our small, modest way, part of this story. And small tweaks in that story can have huge effects on the overall plot line. And that's something well worth thinking about. The important thing, I think, in life is to not feel that helplessness in the face of massive forces and events way beyond our control, but to find what we can do in our little corner, as it were, in our modest way, to make a difference, maybe for just someone, but that makes a difference in the world. There's this paralysis that we fall into sometimes of over-expectation. It's either that we really can do something huge and impressive, or else we can't do anything at all. I think that faith and hope, which are really functions of the imagination, show us that we have to picture the sort of change that we can bring. Now, some people have been waiting a long time for the world to change, to become more equal. A world where people of color, where women, where LGBT people, people with disabilities, all kinds of people, people on the breadline, have been waiting for a long time. And there's this lovely song, which is called Be the Change, by a guy called Spawn Breezy. And it's a lovely song, which perhaps is focused particularly on the Black experience, Black Lives Matter, but actually it speaks to this whole range of people who are waiting and hoping for the world to change, and who are looking to all of us to help be part of that change.
No peace! No peace! No peace! I have a dream. My poor little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but
Let our voices stand strong together. Can nothing hold us down. The history will repeat, but we gotta break the cycle now. Let's stand together. The only way to make a change is start with me and you now here today. So let's be the change. Yo, so today we decide if we gon' let them divide us. We could end all the protests, the looting and riots, defeat all the evil and cheer for the righteous. I know it can seem the American dream, but remember your rights. No justice, then no peace. Low key, protect all the OPs, the OGs, women and children, but forget the system and police the police. Only we can protect us now. Only one thing left for us to do. Let our voices stand strong together. Can nothing hold us down. The history will repeat, but we gotta break the cycle now. Let's stand together. The only way to make a change is start with me and you now here today. So let's be the change. They say this land's built on violence, so why are we silent? See, our mothers are crying as our babies are dying. We don't wanna hurt no more. No more police brutality. We just want our equality. Never thought that I'd see the day of humanity afraid. We need to make a change. Oh, right now. Only love could save us. Hope it ain't too late to bring us peace. Bring us peace. Let our voices stand strong together. Can nothing hold us down. The history will repeat, but we gotta break the cycle now. Let's stand together. The only way to make a change is start with me and you now here today. Let our voices stand strong together.
I have a dream when all of God's children, black men and white men, will join hands.
Let's stand together. The only way to make a change is start with me and you now here today. So let's be the change.
Here's a prayer. The lovely icon of Martin Luther King, which is by the iconographer Kelly Lattimore. In a world where people are still judged according to the color of their skin, in a world where women are still frequently paid less for doing the same work, or are abused or treated with disdain, in a world where money speaks and poverty means millions are silenced, in a world where the scourge of slavery still flourishes in ways mostly hidden, in a world where folk are hated and persecuted because they're attracted to the wrong people. Oh, heart of love, may we never sit back and say, it's the way of the world. I'm powerless. I can't do anything. God grant us holy rage and the will and courage to be the change we wish to see in the world. Amen. Going back to Stephen Toulmin's statement, his choice between facing the future and backing into it, I think that perhaps one of the areas where that is most relevant today is in our relationship to the planet. The more I look at this subject, the more I listen to people talking about it, the more I hear what is a process now well underway through climate change, the more scary it is. The huge, huge percentages of insects that have already disappeared from the earth. And, you know, our life depends on insects. The trees, so many different aspects of the world that are already, who knows, perhaps beyond a tipping point. And so it's important that we don't hold on to what's gone before, thinking that it can just go on interminably. And it's not comfortable. It's not comfortable to any one of us to face up to the implications of this, to reimagine what things like success and progress could mean in the future. And it's sometimes so frustrating that you feel politicians are so entrenched in their own status quo and the pressure of needing to be re-elected next time, that you just feel, who's going to have the courage to do something about all of this? This guy who I like rather a lot, his name is Prince EA. He's a rapper and a poet. And he says a lot of things that I find pretty challenging and inspirational. And this is his letter to the future.
Dear future generations, I think I speak for the rest of us when I say, sorry. Sorry we left you with our mess of a planet. Sorry that we were too caught up in our own doings to do something. Sorry we listened to people who made excuses to do nothing. I hope you forgive us. We just didn't realize how special the earth was. Like a marriage gone wrong, we didn't know what we had until it was gone. For example, I'm guessing you probably know it as the Amazon desert, right? Well, believe it or not, it was once called the Amazon rainforest, and there were billions of trees there, all of them gorgeous. And oh, you don't know much about trees, do you? Well, let me tell you, trees are amazing. I mean, we literally breathe the air they are creating. They clean up our pollution, our carbon. They store and purify water, give us medicine that cures our diseases, food that feeds us, which is why I'm so sorry to tell you that we burn them down. Cut them down with brutal machines, horrific, at a rate of 40 football fields every minute. That's 50% of all the trees in the world gone in the last 100 years. Why? For this. And that wouldn't make me so sad if it weren't so many pictures of leaves on it. You know, when I was a child, I read how the Native Americans had such consideration for the planet that they felt responsible for how they left the land for the next 7 generations. Which brings me great sorrow, because most of us today don't even care about tomorrow. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry that we put profit above people, greed above need, the rule of gold above the golden rule. I'm sorry we use nature as a credit card with no spending limit, overdrafting animals to extinction, stealing your chance to ever see their uniqueness or become friends with them. Sorry we poison the ocean so much that you can't even swim in them. But most of all, I'm sorry about our mindset, 'cause we had the nerve to call this destruction progress. I'm sorry we doomed you, and I'm sorry we couldn't find another planet in time to move to. You know what? Cut the beat. I'm not sorry. This future, I do not accept it, because an error does not become a mistake until you refuse to correct it. We can redirect this. How? Let me suggest that if a farmer sees a tree that is unhealthy, they don't look at the branches to diagnose it, they look at the root. So like that farmer, we must look at the root, and not to the branches of government, not to the politicians run by corporations. We are the root, we are the foundation. This generation, it is up to us to take care of this planet. It is our only home. We must globally warm our hearts and change the climate of our souls and realize that we are not apart from nature, we are a part of nature. And to betray nature is to betray us. To save nature is to save us. Because whatever you're fighting for, racism or poverty, feminism, gay rights, or any type of equality, it won't matter in the least. Because if we don't all work together to save the environment, we will be equally extinct. Sorry.
So if you've got a candle, I invite you to join me in lighting a candle now for courage. A cry from our own hearts that we will find courage in our time to do something, somewhere, for someone. Courage is a product of imagination, hope, defiant imagination, even in the face of despair. We find courage when we find a different imagination that says, do you know what? This doesn't have to be this way. Whether that's something out there in the world or whether it's something in your own backyard, in your own life, some situation that you've lived with for too long and that you really would like to see change. It begins with imagination, daring to say, it doesn't have to be this way. You can join in with me if you wish. God grant us resilience in adapting to things we cannot change, resolve to change what we can, and unyielding imagination to envisage and pursue a future of justice and sustainability for all creation. Amen.
When did we start getting so scared so easily? Forgetting what it was like to stand up for what was simply the decent thing to do. When did a punchline replace the ability and strength to stand up for what was right? What was right? Not the kind of right that blindly attacks anything different than us, but the kind of right that adds meaning and virtue to life, adds truth to facts, and adds beauty to motion, and wisdom to knowledge. When did recoiling back into ourselves replace the inclination to step forward, to challenge compromise, and to shoot down empty one-liners? There was a time when brilliance didn't frighten us, but instead invigorated us. When innovation wasn't intimidating, but instead filled us with awe. Courage isn't stupid, or blind, or impetuous. No. Courage, it's bold. It's uncompromising. It's alive. It's who we were before we forgot. It's telling those who say different to take a hike without an ounce of care or a molecule of hate. Courage.
Steve Jobs, just before he died, made a speech to some students. And part of what he said was this: don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. And most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. It's not in the Bible, but I think it probably could be. Only joking. God of all creation, whose joyful whisper is heard in the sweet melodies of a humble Donach, whose assurance embraces us each day in the faithfulness of sunrise. We give thanks for our brother Jesus, one free as the wind, who would not be trapped by religious dogma or the results of other people's thinking. We are grateful for his liberating support of the little and the least, the struggling and rejected, and people like ourselves who hold hard questions for life and faith. Today we raise a glass to the God we cannot escape, whose presence fills the whole earth, who is disclosed in the tiniest creature and in the majesty of a billion stars. We raise a glass to the God revealed in a frail human who traveled through deathliness and showed us the way into passionate life. We raise a glass to the divine spirit, infusing each atom with worth and purpose, and forever breathing us, mere humans, and an entire planet into daily new life. Amen to life. L'chaim. Well, we'll drink that in just a moment, but I want to finish with an incredible piece of music. You're going to love it. It might make you cry, but you'll love it. I've put up the words here. It's by a singer called Sia, who I've always loved. I love her voice and love her music. She's not actually singing the song. I'll tell you about that in a moment, but it's called Courage to Change. Just take a moment to just flick your eye across the lyrics. The song is sung by an incredibly beautiful children's choir from the Ukraine. They're called the, what are they called? That's it, Color Music Children's Choir. They all are from Ukraine. They all live in Ukraine. I don't know how many of them are still there right now. I know on the website, it says how the smiles of these beautiful children have been taken away by events that have gone on there. But they're a beautiful, talented bunch, aged between 4 and 18 years of age. And, you know, it's the chorus that strikes me so much in listening to it. Have I the courage to change? Have I the courage to change? And those lines, you're not alone in all this. You're not alone, I promise. Standing together, we can do anything, which, wow, just has such amazing resonance with what's happening there right now. So I've put a few little flags at the bottom as a way of expressing our solidarity with these young people, with their families, with all that it represents. And I'm not entirely sure. I think that this is in Kyiv, that it's filmed, but it's in one of the big cities. And it's a sobering thing to think how their world has changed.
World, I want to leave you better. I want my life to matter. I am afraid I have no purpose here. I watch the news on TV, abandon myself daily. I am afraid to let you see the real me. Rain it falls, put it on me and the rain it falls, so in the seeds
Well, I invite you to put your cameras